Hello, my name is Rob Bulat, and I will be doing the close reading for the graphic novel Persepolis. These are some of the things I was able to pull that really intrigued me, or I've talked about before previously. So, no particular order. There's nationalism, faith, children, war, and growing up, and the personal versus the political. So, I think I want to target for my first entry point, is faith. Faith plays a very important part to the overall character of Marjane, the main character, as in the first few scenes we see her, she's talking about how everything, about the religious aspects of her life. She talks about, I was born with religion. Now, at the age of 6, she sure was wanting to be the last prophet. This was a few years before the revolution, as she says before. But her beliefs and overall faith over the time of the book, as years go by, change and go with the times, right? With this, you also see a lot of visual cues, right? She imagines these very distinct ideas. For example, another thing that really ties into the book is also Marjane's imagination, which I talked about in the first Educated Guess. So, in the book, you see her ideas of how the demonstration looked, and how it's articulated, or not really articulated, but illustrated in the eyes of a child. You see them all together, clustered, it's overbearing, but it's not to the point where it's a child's mind of what would happen in these events. Another thing that is very interesting is how she brings up the idea of how the overall Shah was able to overthrow the emperor and install a republic. Another thing that shows her fantasy is how she's able to do this imagery of her father as when her father tells her that her grandfather was a prince, she imagines some elaborate, intricate ideas of her grandfather on an elephant with a crown on his head, with the sun beaming down on him, and a lion with a sword. That's the most illustrative imagery of a child when it comes to hearing that their grandfather was just royalty. The thing that ties into the idea of faith is, of course, the character of God and how he plays a very important role to Marjane. For example, in this scene, you could see God always being around her, and he almost serves as, I would like to say, a voice of reason. Like a reason that it helps her go throughout the day. She sees him at nighttime as they have big discussions. For example, she's like, God, give me more time. I'm not quite ready. And she's talking about how she's trying to find the best choices. And it's throughout the book, in the beginning of the book, she talks to God a lot. But later on through the book, it's almost as she loses God in a sort of way. Also in chapter 7, on page 57, it shows how she's able to, in this chapter, shows her connection with God, as she feels the most comfortable with God and his arms. But overall, in the book, you can see her faith be changed throughout. In the chapter, The Sheep, where a lot of her loved ones that she finds to be, that she cares for and everything. In chapter 9, called The Sheep, a lot of Margie's friends get killed off. Like Kaveh, when he leave her life. Mohsen is drowned, Siamak and his family are executed, and Anush, her uncle, is imprisoned and executed. With all these things going around her, she questions her faith and overall beliefs in religion. She believes that if these things she would have believed that God would have stopped them. She believes that if God was really there, He would have helped stop it. And this could be illustrated by her seeing God for almost the last time, and God asks, "What's the problem?" And she's just so angry. She says, "Shut up and get out of my life. I never want to see you again. Get out." And it was like she lost a part of herself. You could see that. She's completely lost. She just feels the void of this religion and faith that she's been so woven around. It's a big part of her character and everything. And without it, she feels like there's nothing left for her. Another very interesting idea that's also brought into the book is the personal versus the political. I could say this could be first seen in like the first chapters due to how throughout the book it's been established that there's a social class, a social hierarchy throughout the novel, and how a lot of the upper class have a different point of view of Marjane's family. Marjane's family has the minority view of having communist beliefs. The communist beliefs in this hand makes her almost like an outcast or an outlier in the whole scheme of the upper and middle class political spectrum. Another thing that's also brought up into the personal political thing is how the social class affects Marjane. The first thing you see with this is, I wouldn't say the first time, but another good example of this would be how a lot of their viewpoints can be contradicted by just showing off how they view other people. Like Merhi, their maid, was forbid from dating one of the neighbors or seeing one of the neighbors due to her social class being that of a maid. And her father, even though being one with communist beliefs, which means that everyone is equal, which would totally go against the idea of communism, forbids her and tells the man the truth. And to Marjane's dismay, she learns of this and she's like, why is this? Why is this happening? It doesn't make any sense. It's like, because and the father says, of course, because in this country, you must stay within your own social class. And this shows also how it ties into the fact of a child. Like, just like a child would act, she's upset, she's flustered, she's angry, and she cries because it's like, it's not fair to her. She doesn't understand the concepts of these social constructs. She understands them to the degree of, yeah, I understand she's a maid and stuff like that, but she doesn't understand the limitations that comes with it, and also why is it like that? Why is the system so against her friend and everything? It's also this also ties into my discussion question, how I was trying to answer the question of how does social class of Marjane's family conflict with their political views? And I also was able to tie this back into personal versus political, and how a lot of the time, a lot of their ideas that the Marjane family have are those of left-wing ideals, but they still go by social class, which is more of a fundamentalist idea. Though a lot of the personal attack, like the ideas that Marji has, are that of more communist ideas. A lot of some of the smaller things contradict their overall beliefs as a whole. Like, this idea of the ideological purity is one of the most fundamental things that they did. The father saying that, oh, this country has the specific rules is a fundamentalist belief. They are taking the pure ideas of the nation that has put them upon them that has put upon them these claims of social class. Another topic that's talked about a lot, and it's not really brought up, but it's a very ranging topic in the whole book. It's martyrdom and war, pretty much. Like, martyrdom is seen throughout a lot of the chapters, as you see a lot of the people close to Marjane pass away, and due to being executed or due to war-related events, and they almost serve to the story as almost martyrs for the character of Marjane. In chapter 9, titled The Sheep, a lot of, like, the killings of her friends and a lot of her loved ones caused her to drop her religion altogether. She lost faith in God. Like, things like that influence the character, and it's not really martyrdom. Like, it is martyrdom, but it's the idea that this martyrdom of the loss of her family could affect her to such a personal and psychological level. Things like that are very influential in the book, and a lot of the loss of life in the book illustrate how this is all being seen from the eyes of a child. War is being seen through the eyes of a child. These events that usually are so heavy and so seen by a lot of older people is seen by the eyes of a 10-year-old girl growing up in a war-torn country. And that's what I think is very interesting about this book. It shows the eyes of a 10-year-old as she's growing up and developing. She's not a fully grown teenager who's just like, oh, this is happening right now. Okay, I get it. This is a 10-year-old whose ideas are still developing. Her, like, constructs of what is right and what's wrong are still in the process of still being developed. And throughout this book, she's going through a roller coaster of different emotions, thoughts, and just overall thinking patterns. Like, her whole ideology changes from the first chapter to the 14th chapter. It's crazy, from being very strict in her religion to the idea that she wanted to be a prophet, to then dropping it altogether because of the torment and the devastation that she's witnessed firsthand. And she also is, like, from the first chapter, you see that she's like a student who sometimes gets in trouble, but during chapters like chapter 19, chapter 18, and even like chapter 15, she changes in how she portrays herself. She now smokes cigarettes. She skips class. At the end of the book, she even gets expelled. Like, these aren't things that the original Marjane in the beginning of the book would have ever done. These things that go through her head have changed her from being this girl who just wanted to be a prophet to being a girl who doesn't really know what she wants anymore. And I think that's a very cool and very elaborate way of showing how war affects a growing mind. And I think that's why this book works so well to encapsulate the feeling of a person growing up. It doesn't just show a person who's already grown up. It feels like you're reading a story that was written by a 10-year-old. And I think the idea of just using this as almost like an accelerant to her change, it's a very well and detailed way of thinking. And I think this book shows in a very elaborate way how martyrdom, nationalism, the personal and political, and children and war and growing up, and faith all tie together to make Persepolis what it is.